Hello, my name is Mata. Today's video is going to be about Black History Month. My last video was on the importance of Black history, so I think it kind of ties quite nicely into Black History Month. So today we're going to talk about what Black History Month is, how it came about, and whether or not we should be celebrating Black History Month, because as strange as it sounds, it is a debate. So what is Black History Month? Black History Month, very simply put, is a month where we celebrate, educate, and in general discuss Black history. Usually it will be focused on your specific area or country, but not always. We in the UK will sometimes talk about Martin Luther King, for example, during Black History Month, so it's not always limited to just our own country, but it can be a worldwide kind of discussion as well. So Black History Month occurs in February in North America and in October in Europe. So we here in the UK celebrate it in October. Black History Month kind of acts as a celebration of the achievements of particularly Black individuals of the past, but also obviously Black individuals of the present, and is also kind of used as a kind of springboard for discussion about race as well. So how did Black History Month come about? Yes, I am talking about the history of Black History Month. The US's Black History Month was founded in 1926, originally as Negro History Week by Carter G. Woodson. Woodson chose the second week of February since it coincided with both Abraham Lincoln's and Frederick Douglass's birthdays. In 1969, Black students and educators from the Kent State University proposed the first Black History Month, which was then celebrated the year after. 6 years after that, after being celebrated in various organisations and establishments across the country, President Gerald Ford officially recognised February as Black History Month, as has, I think, every president following him. The first British Black History Month was celebrated in London in 1987. It was organised by a Ghanaian called Akiaba Adai-Sebo. In subsequent interviews since, he has said that he chose October because it was a time where the weather was not terrible and there were fewer exams, so it was easier for schools to actually celebrate it. And as someone who has organised Black History Month events at uni, thanks. Yeah, it would not have been fun to do that during exam time.
Just as an extra point, in an interview with Black History Month UK, Adai-Sebo mentioned that one of his reasons for starting up Black History Month in the UK the way it is to kind of counter the identity crisis that Black children felt around their identity. Additionally, he talks about specifically why October was chosen, and he says, and I quote, he settled on October when the weather was not cold and children were fresh after the long summer vacation and had less to worry about exams and tests, and the camaraderie was stronger as they shared experiences. You can find the link to that article in the description.
Black History Month has been celebrated in the UK for over 30 years now, so it has become a staple of the diversity calendar, I suppose you could put it. In the US, Black History Month is very much seen as for the African Americans. I think it has been called at times African American History Month or something along the lines of that, whereas in the UK it's very much for all ethnic minorities. So for our Black History Month, yes, we may have a focus on Afro-Caribbean culture, but it won't necessarily be limited to just that. I know, for example, that I in the past have helped organise Bollywood nights as a part of Black History Month, and particularly when it comes to British history, most of the issues that we as British Black individuals face, they're also faced by other ethnic minorities in this country, and I'm not even going to comment on the Commonwealth. So I think this is quite a good time to kind of start talking about Black History Month and whether or not we should celebrate it. It may seem really kind of clear-cut of like, oh, well, yes, of course we should be celebrating Black History Month. It is actually quite fiercely debated, and it's not just from people who are quote-unquote racists. I'm trying to be nice so that people don't say that I'm calling them racist. But from both white people and black people and loads of others. So let's first talk about why we should celebrate Black History Month. So as I mentioned in my video on why Black history is important, we don't teach enough about Black history in our country, particularly in the UK. I'm not entirely sure about America, but in the UK, even when it comes to Black History Month, we still don't really talk about it. The national curriculum has learning about the slave trade and the Commonwealth and things like that as an option, but I honestly don't know anyone who was taught that at school. So it's something that, like, technically could have been taught about, but it just isn't to this day. So because of that, we don't really get the chance to talk about the role that Black individuals have had in our history. And Black History Month basically gives us a chance to celebrate who we are, to celebrate our culture, or our cultures, and to celebrate what makes us great. It's a chance to showcase our achievements, past and present. It is a chance to talk about notable figures who have been essentially erased from history and to talk about why they deserve to have their place in the spotlight, but also a chance to showcase and properly prove that certain areas that are predominantly white shouldn't be. When you talk about film, music, most medias, realistically, it's a chance to showcase the best that Black directors or Black producers or Black musicians or Black actors, Black writers have to offer. Right now, Black History Month isn't really being given the same respect as quote-unquote white history, so it can also be argued that it's better to ensure that Black history is discussed at least once a year than potentially never. Unfortunately, that is the reality. So what are the reasons for not celebrating Black History Month? The best place to start, I think, is with Morgan Freeman. Now, there's quite a famous, or infamous, I suppose you could say, a quote from Morgan Freeman on Black History Month, where he calls it ridiculous. Now, I think, just before I go into this point, I will say that obviously there are people who will say that we shouldn't celebrate Black History Month because it's not fair to the white people, or something along the lines of that. The same way that when we are celebrating International Women's Day, people are like, oh, but when's International Men's Day? If we're celebrating Pride Month, people will say, oh, but what about straight pride? You'll always have these people who will counter these kind of liberation and, for lack of a better word, pride events with a, oh, but what about us? I mean, we can all see that with the Black Lives Matter movement, the whole All Lives Matter. These people that are saying All Lives Matter don't necessarily believe that. It's important to separate those criticisms out from, for lack of a better term, legitimate criticisms. We shouldn't say there shouldn't be a Black History Month because it's unfair to white people, because that just ignores the hundreds and hundreds of years of systematic racism and is basically the reason why there is a Black History Month in the first place. So we're going to ignore that, and we're just going to focus on the legitimate criticisms. So Morgan Freeman claimed that Black History Month was ridiculous, and in this interview he was asked to elaborate on that. And his response was, well, where is White History Month? Now obviously alarm bells might be ringing, going, that's just, but what about us argument. But he goes on to explain that there isn't a White History Month because white history is considered the norm, and Black history isn't an extra. It isn't an elective subject that you can do. It isn't something that you can just add on at the side. It is a part of our history. So if we don't have a White History Month, then we shouldn't have a Black History Month, because we should just be talking about history. The point that he's making is that the existence of a Black History Month is, for lack of a better term, tokenizing. it suggests that Black history is not as important as white history, and it almost implies that Black history can be spoken about once a year and then we have kind of reached our quota. That just talking about Black history once is fine, and that's all you need. And you may agree or disagree with this, but I think it is an important point to take, that we do have a distinction, even now, to our country's history, and then we have other history. Now, this might be Black history, it might be LGBT history, it might be women's history, it might be anything like that. We do tend to distinguish. It does almost imply that history can only be made by straight, white, cis, male figures, which is obviously not true. You would think that Obama's presidency would not be classed as Black history, but as US history. So, what do I think about Black History Month? I see Black History Month as pretty much a Black Pride Month. A time when I can be proud to be Black and to celebrate the achievements of people of colour throughout history. Whether that is someone from hundreds of years ago, like Mary Prince or Ignatius Sancho, or whether that's someone from more recent times, like Amal Azzudin. Right now, we don't talk about Black history. We don't teach about Black history, and even now it is still seen as other. We still talk about the Empire in some kind of Disneyfied way, where we haven't mentioned the fact that the British Empire was responsible for millions of deaths and for the pillage and looting of probably millions of pounds worth of resources from countries. And when you have effectively erased a part of your history because it puts you in a bad light, I don't think that's right. We talk about how taking down Confederate statues will mean that we have lost our history or that we're changing history somehow. And I disagree with that, but if you're going to comment on that, I think you also need to comment on the fact that we don't talk about large parts of our history. There was a tweet that I saw, I'll put it up if I can find it, but it was something along the lines of British history is like, oh, the Romans, the Tudors, and then we're going to skip a bit, and then there was the 2 world wars that we won. And that pretty much sums up the state of the British education system when it comes to history. Now, I think there is a legitimate criticism that Black History Month as a concept is tokenising. I think that is true. You can see countless Black artists will comment on the fact that they struggle throughout the year, but when it comes to Black History Month, they will have tons and tons of people asking if they can do events during this particular month, but then outside of that month, they have nothing. Whenever I made events for Black History Month, I would always do my best to make sure that it was, yes, we had the month and we had a jam-packed event schedule, but we also had things outside that month, whether it was just after, whether it was a few months after, just so it wasn't just, we're only going to talk about this in this specific time and then that's it. I really didn't want to be one of those people. I think it was really important for me to do that, and I think that's a good way to kind of balance it out. I think it is really important to use Black History Month as the platform that it is to kind of say, hey, we need to talk about these issues, because it's on people's minds. People want to see documentaries about being Black or about Black issues. People want to hear Black music, see Black films, read Black writing, but you also want to make sure that afterwards they are still doing that. So use the platform of Black History Month to start those conversations and then make sure that they continue afterwards. It wouldn't be right if I didn't end this video with just a little discussion on what's kind of been happening recently. It is absolutely amazing to see the response in the Black Lives Matter movement to what has happened with George Floyd. For those of you who obviously don't know, I am Black, and explaining what it's like to be Black in the UK is sometimes really difficult. Everyone's experience is different, and I'm not going to say that my experience is universal, but I have experienced racism. I have experienced a lot of negative things about my own race, and that is very demoralizing. When we see things like what is happening right now in America and we use it as a national or worldwide conversation, that is absolutely great. You should absolutely use these moments to get messages across, because that's when people are paying attention. But this isn't something that happens for 2 weeks or a month and then stops. Unfortunately, this is reality for a lot of us in the world, and it's important that when the media is no longer talking about this, when the protests are no longer happening, it's important to still be motivated, to continue fighting, because this isn't the first time we've done this. This isn't the second or third time we've done this. I've lost count of the number of times that we have stood up for injustice, and each time I think, no, I think something's going to happen this time, and then it fizzles out, nothing does. It's been absolutely heartwarming to see so many of my friends basically sharing that message of, when we're no longer talking about this, it doesn't mean it's over. And so I think it's important to remember that. You know, keep signing petitions, keep donating to charity if you can, keep writing to your local politicians, keep working towards this, because it doesn't just go away overnight, and it may not be as obvious to you, but this has been reality for us for longer than I would like to admit. Yeah. Unfortunately, things like this, they don't happen in Black History Month. They aren't just assigned to a single month. So I think it's important to act when they do. But again, keep the conversation going. Don't let it stop. Oh. Anyway, I know that got a little heavy at the end, but I just think it's really important to mention that at the end of the day, whether you see Black History Month as a way to educate or a way to celebrate, it's still important to not just let it be 1 month of education or celebration, but an entire year that kind of springs from this 1 month almost. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please consider giving it a like down there. If you would like to see more, please subscribe, and I will hopefully see you in the next video. Bye!